Darkness. The sound of breathing. Slow. Steady. The rhythm of deep sleep. Then a pulse. Faint at first. A heartbeat captured by sensors in the dark. 62 beats per minute. 63. 64. Green LED lights firing through skin, searching for blood flow. Then something changes. The breathing stops. The heartbeat accelerates. 72. 85. 94. The green LED lights fire faster now, searching for blood flow through skin that's beginning to sweat. A sound in the distance, mechanical, growing louder. The deep, throaty growl of a 3-liter engine. The heartbeat spikes. 110, 125, 143. The sensors detect the tremor in the wrist, not movement, but the body's involuntary response to adrenaline flooding the system. By the time investigators arrived, the man was dead. His wife was in the driveway, trembling, pointing toward the garage. The scene looked like a tragic accident, but the watch on his wrist had recorded everything. Every heartbeat, every desperate step, every second of his final 12 minutes. And when detectives downloaded the data, they found something impossible. A timestamp that proved his wife had been lying. A heart rate that couldn't belong to a dead man. And a digital trail that would expose a murder so calculated she'd planned it down to the millisecond. This is the story of how a smartwatch became the only witness to the perfect crime. Marcus Chen tracked everything. His Apple Watch recorded his entire life in data points. Sleep cycles, workout intensity, step counts, heart rate variability, GPS routes. Months of historical data showed a man who lived by routine. But the data didn't show what mattered. It didn't capture the way he'd wake at 5:30 a.m., 15 minutes before his alarm, just to start the coffee maker before Jennifer's first meeting. French press, 2 scoops of the Ethiopian blend she loved. He'd leave it on the kitchen counter with a note. Kick ass today. The last note was still there when investigators arrived. The coffee had gone cold hours before. It didn't record the satisfaction he felt solving impossible problems at the semiconductor company. Chip architecture that pushed the boundaries of physics. Problems that kept entire teams stuck for weeks. He'd crack them in an afternoon. He'd come home energized, talking about his work like other men talked about sports. The watch tracked his morning runs, 5 miles, same route, but it couldn't measure why he ran. The clarity it gave him. The way solutions to engineering problems would crystallize somewhere around mile 3. He and Jennifer had turned their digital life into a game. Friendly competitions through the Apple Watch activity sharing feature. Who could close their rings first? Who logged more steps? Who burned more calories? It started as motivation, then became their language, a way to stay connected when his work consumed 12-hour days. She'd text him, "Closed my rings at 2 p.m., you're falling behind." He'd respond with a screenshot of his workout summary. The playful trash talk of 2 people who built a life together. The rings meant something. Not the arbitrary calorie goals or the step counts. They meant, I'm here, I'm trying, I see you trying too. Jennifer had stopped trying to close her rings 3 months before he died. The 911 call came in at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. A woman's voice, trembling. "My husband, he's not breathing. I think he's dead." His wife gave investigators a clear timeline. She woke at 6:30 a.m., noticed he wasn't in bed, went downstairs around 6:45 a.m., found him collapsed in the gym. She called 911 immediately. The initial scene assessment supported her story. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle, no visible injuries. The working theory was sudden cardiac arrest. But Detective Sarah Kovacs noticed something. The Apple Watch was still strapped to his wrist, still recording, still syncing to the cloud. She called the digital forensics unit before anyone touched the body. The watch was still recording, still searching for a heartbeat, still waiting to tell someone what it had seen. Jennifer watched from the doorway as they bagged her husband's watch. She had no idea what was already stored inside it. The watch had been photographed in place, then carefully removed and placed in a Faraday bag. Marcus's iPhone was seized from the nightstand upstairs, his iPad from the home office. Jennifer seemed cooperative, shocked, grieving, willing to answer questions. She signed consent forms for the devices. She walked investigators through the house, pointing out his usual routine. She mentioned he'd been stressed at work lately. Long hours, difficult projects. She wondered if that stress had finally caught up with him. Investigators nodded, took notes, and said nothing about what the watch had already revealed. Dr. Reyes ordered a full toxicology panel: blood, urine, vitreous fluid from the eyes, tissue samples from the liver and kidneys. She was looking for anything that could explain the death: drugs, poisons, metabolic disorders. The preliminary results came back 3 days later. Trace amounts of organophosphate compounds, pesticides, not enough to be lethal, but enough to flag for further analysis. She called Detective Kovacs directly. "This isn't cardiac arrest. I don't know what killed him yet, but someone moved the body after death, and there are chemical compounds that shouldn't be there." Kovacs had already suspected as much. The Apple Watch data had told her the timeline was fabricated. Now the autopsy confirmed it. She requested an expanded toxicology panel. Test for everything: common poisons, prescription drugs, industrial chemicals, gases. She wanted carboxyhemoglobin levels checked specifically. That would reveal carbon monoxide exposure. While waiting for those results, Kovacs turned her attention to the one witness that couldn't be intimidated, couldn't change its story, and couldn't lie under oath. The Apple Watch had recorded everything. Now she needed to understand exactly what it had seen. What she found would rewrite the timeline of death itself. David Park had extracted data from hundreds of devices: phones, tablets, laptops. But he'd never held a murder witness in his hand before. He connected Marcus's Apple Watch to a forensic workstation using a write-blocking device. This prevented any data from being written to the watch during analysis. Everything he extracted would be read-only, preserving the original evidence. The watch's secure enclave, a dedicated chip that stores encrypted data, contained raw sensor logs going back 6 months. Every heartbeat, every step, every GPS coordinate, all timestamped to the millisecond. Park initiated the extraction protocol. If this failed, the only witness to Marcus Chen's murder would be silenced forever. The progress bar appeared on his screen. 1%, 2%, then it stopped. Park stared at the frozen bar. This wasn't normal. The secure enclave should stream data continuously once the authentication handshake completes. He checked the connection. Solid. The write blocker was functioning properly. The watch had power, but the extraction had stalled at 4%. He'd seen this before. Corrupted firmware, water damage to the secure enclave chip, physical trauma that fractured the storage medium. Any of those failures meant the data was gone. Without this watch, the case collapsed into circumstantial fragments. A body, a suspicious timeline. No proof of what actually happened in that garage. He tried a secondary extraction protocol. Slower, more careful. 7%, 11%, frozen. One option left: direct chip access. If he damaged the secure enclave, the data would be destroyed forever. He initiated the protocol. 12%, 23, 49, 62. Park didn't breathe, didn't move, just watched the percentage climb. 81%, 94%. Extraction complete. 6 months of Marcus Chen's life, compressed into a 4.2 gigabyte file. Park ran an integrity check on the extracted data, verifying the cryptographic signatures, comparing the secure enclave logs against the cloud backup. The def data matched the cloud backup perfectly, bit for bit. Everything up to 3:47 a.m. was verified and intact. But the watch also contained data that wasn't in the backup, activity recorded after Marcus was already dead. The data was intact, uncorrupted, complete. He'd almost lost it, but now he had everything. Park opened the timeline viewer, started scrolling backward from the morning of the 911 call, looking for anomalies, gaps in the data, anything that didn't fit the pattern. He found it immediately. A pulse recorded at 5:30 a.m., hours after Marcus Chen had died. Park stared at the screen, checked the timestamp, verified the data integrity. The cryptographic signature was valid. The secure enclave logs matched the cloud backup perfectly. The watch had detected a heartbeat, but it wasn't Marcus's heart. He started with the night of the murder, knowing he'd just found the thread that would unravel everything. At 11:47 p.m., Marcus's heart rate was 58 beats per minute. The watch had him in stage 3 sleep, deep, restorative sleep. His movement was minimal, just the slight shifts of someone sleeping soundly. This pattern continued for hours, heart rate fluctuating between 56 and 64 BPM. Normal REM cycles every 90 minutes. The accelerometer showed almost no movement. Then at 3:16:04 a.m., everything changed. His heart rate jumped from 62 to 94. 8 seconds. The green LED lights fire. Strobe against skin, suddenly slick with sweat. This isn't waking. This is alarm. Body screaming. Something wrong. Accelerometer captures it. Sudden. Violent. Sitting up. Disoriented. Gyroscope shows his head turning. Sharp. Frantic. Looking for the sound. Sensors detect the tremor. His wrist shaking. Not intentional. Involuntary. Body flooded with adrenaline. Fight or flight. But there's nowhere to run. At 3:16:47 a.m., the GPS chip activated. It placed the watch and Marcus in the garage, 23 feet from where he should have been sleeping. But Park noticed something else in the data. Something that didn't make sense. Between 3:30 a.m. and 5:29 a.m., the watch recorded at nothing. No movement, no pulse, skin temperature dropping steadily. This was consistent with death. Then at 5:30:07 a.m., the sensors detected something impossible. A pulse. Marcus Chen had been dead for 2 hours. So whose heart was the watch recording? Not Marcus's pulse. The watch was detecting a heart rate of 72 BPM. Skin temperature had jumped from 82 degrees back up to 96 degrees. The accelerometer showed movement again. Someone had put the watch on their own wrist. For the next 45 minutes, the watch recorded activity, step counts, movement patterns, changes in elevation. But the gait analysis didn't match Marcus's baseline. Park had 6 months of his walking data for comparison. Stride length, step frequency, impact patterns. They create a unique signature. The person wearing the watch between 5:30 a.m. and 6:15 a.m. wasn't Marcus Chen. Park pulled up the historical data. Marcus was 6'1", 180 pounds. His average stride length during normal walking, 31.2 inches. His step frequency, 112 steps per minute. Consistent, predictable. The biomechanics of a tall man with a measured gait. The morning of his death, the watch recorded a stride length of 27.4 inches. Step frequency of 118 steps per minute. Shorter steps, faster cadence, a different person entirely. Someone had removed the watch from Marcus's dead body, worn it themselves, then placed it back on his wrist before calling 911. They'd tried to fake his timeline, make it look like he was alive and active during his normal morning routine. But the sensors had captured the truth. Detective Kovacs requested a warrant for Jennifer Chen's devices within the hour. Her Apple Watch, her iPhone, her iPad. Every piece of technology registered to her name. The data came back 2 days later. Jennifer's watch showed her asleep from 11 p.m. until 5:29 a.m. Heart rate consistent with deep sleep, minimal movement, normal REM cycles. Then, at 5:29 a.m., the watch was removed from her wrist. Skin temperature sensors showed the device separating from skin contact. For exactly 46 minutes, it recorded no biometric data. Just sitting on a nightstand or dresser, disconnected from a living person. It was placed back on her wrist at 6:15 a.m. At 6:28:47 a.m., her heart rate increased as she woke naturally. The pattern looked completely normal. The exact window when Marcus's watch was recording activity from someone else. Park laid out both timelines side by side on his monitor. The correlation was undeniable. 5:29 a.m., Jennifer's watch removed from her wrist. 5:30 a.m., Marcus's watch placed on a living person's wrist. 6:15 a.m., Marcus's watch removed and placed back on his dead body. 6:15 a.m., Jennifer's watch placed back on her wrist. She'd taken off her own watch, put on his, walked through the house generating activity data, then switched them back. She tried to create the illusion that Marcus was alive and moving around during his normal morning routine. But the biometric signatures gave her away. The biomechanics matched Jennifer perfectly. She'd worn his watch and walked through the house, thinking she could fake his timeline. Every sensor in the watch had recorded the truth. Heart rate, gait analysis, biometric signatures, all pointing to the same conclusion. Park had mapped her movements through the house. But the real proof wasn't where she went. It was where she didn't go. And that's what would destroy her alibi completely. Between 5:30 a.m. and 6:15 a.m., the manipulation window, the watch recorded a specific route through the house. Starting point: garage. First movement: through the kitchen. The watch logged 17 steps. GPS coordinates shifting north through the first floor. Second movement: up the main staircase. The watch's altimeter recorded a 12-foot elevation gain, consistent with the staircase that led to the second-floor bedrooms. Third movement: into the master bathroom. GPS placed the watch in the northwest corner of the second floor for 4 minutes. No steps recorded, just standing still. Fourth movement: back down the stairs, through the living room, into the home office. Fifth movement: return to the garage. She rehearsed this, walked it in her mind a dozen times, the perfect simulation of a morning that never happened. But she'd rehearsed her morning, not his. Park pulled up Jennifer's historical location data from her own watch. 6 months of mornings. Her routine was consistent, documented in thousands of data points. Wake up, go to the master bathroom, shower, get dressed. Down to the kitchen for coffee. Sometimes into the home office to check email. Back upstairs to finish getting ready. But Marcus's routine was completely different. His mornings for the past 6 months showed a rigid pattern. Wake up, straight to the home gym, 30 minutes of weights, then out the front door for a run. His GPS tracks showed the same 5-mile loop every day. Back home, upstairs to shower, down to the kitchen for a protein shake. Now investigators needed to know what had actually happened in that garage at 3:17 a.m. And what they were about to discover would be more disturbing than the murder itself. Because Jennifer hadn't just killed her husband, she'd listened to him die. The house had been watching long before the murder. Every device timestamped, every event cloud-backed, an unbreakable record that couldn't be erased or intimidated. Detective Kovacs obtained warrants for all of it. The cloud data came back in a massive file dump. Thousands of events. The house had documented everything. David Park opened the logs and started scrolling backward, looking for the night of the murder. At 11:34 p.m., the night before Marcus died, the front door locked. Digital deadbolt engaged. No other exterior doors opened or closed after that, until morning. At 3:14:22 a.m., the interior garage door opened. The sensor logged it. The one that connected the garage to the main house. Someone had opened that door from inside. Jennifer had calculated this precisely. The bedroom was upstairs, 40 feet away. The CO would dissipate before reaching her. But the sound would travel. The engine noise, the mechanical hum. Just enough to pull Marcus from sleep and draw him to investigate. Carbon monoxide is nearly the same density as air. In a sealed space, it doesn't pool like water. It mixes. Within minutes, the entire garage became a death zone. But Jennifer was 40 feet away, up a flight of stairs, behind a closed bedroom door. By the time any trace reached her, it would be parts per billion, undetectable, harmless. Jennifer went back to bed. She pulled the covers over herself, adjusted the pillow, controlled her breathing to match the slow, steady rhythm of sleep. She couldn't act yet, not for almost 2 hours. Her own Apple Watch needed to show her asleep. If investigators checked her biometric data, and she had to assume they would, it needed to look completely normal. Heart rate in the sleep range, minimal movement, the pattern of someone who'd been in bed all night. Moving too early would create suspicion. Why would she be awake at 4 a.m.? Walking through the house at that hour would stand out, create questions she couldn't answer. So she waited, lying in the dark, listening to the silence where the engine used to be, giving the carbon monoxide time to fully dissipate, giving the body time to cool, giving herself a window that would look natural. Her heart rate, 68 beats per minute, the same as when she'd started the car, the same as when she'd opened the doors, the same as now, steady, controlled, patient. At 5:29 a.m., she was ready. No other doors or windows opened until 5:29 a.m. That's when Jennifer's watch recorded the first movement after she'd woken up. At 5:29:41 a.m., the interior garage door opened, Jennifer entering the garage to begin the manipulation. At 6:15:23 a.m., she exited back into the house. The door remained open. At 6:42:33 a.m., she returned to move the body. Park cross-referenced this with the Apple Watch data. Marcus's heart rate spiked at 3:17 a.m. He died at 3:24 a.m. The interior garage door opened at 3:14 a.m. before he woke. The exterior door stayed sealed until 3:35 a.m. after he died. The timing fit perfectly. Someone had opened the interior door to lure Marcus in, kept the exterior door closed to trap him, then vented the garage after he was dead. Detective Kovacs looked at the temperature graph and understood immediately. She kept it sealed while he was dying, then vented it afterward, getting rid of the evidence. Carbon monoxide dissipates quickly in open air. In 21 minutes, most traces would be gone. Jennifer had sealed the garage during the murder, let the CO build to lethal concentrations, then opened the exterior door after Marcus was dead, gave herself exactly enough time to erase the evidence. But she'd forgotten one thing. The house wasn't just tracking temperature, it was tracking time. And the sequence, sealed during death, vented afterward, created a window that perfectly framed premeditated murder. Carbon monoxide is the perfect murder weapon if you can make it disappear. Colorless, odorless, undetectable without specialized equipment. Jennifer had used the Phoenix night air to clear the evidence. But the house had been recording the entire time. Silent, constant, unbreakable. The expanded toxicology results had confirmed carbon monoxide poisoning. The organophosphate compounds found in the preliminary screening turned out to be incidental, routine yard pesticide exposure. Marcus had treated the property for scorpions 2 weeks before his death. Phoenix homeowners battled constant pest problems. The trace amounts were environmental, not evidence of poisoning. The real weapon was carbon monoxide. Now, Kovacs needed to know if a car had been running in that garage. The house couldn't tell her that directly, but Marcus's car could. Marcus Chen drove a 2022 Tesla Model S, fully electric, zero emissions, a car that produced no carbon monoxide whatsoever. But there was a second vehicle in the garage, a 2019 BMW X5, Jennifer's car, a 3-liter inline-6 engine, the kind that produces carbon monoxide in abundance when running in an enclosed space. Detective Kovacs pulled the event logs from both vehicles. The Tesla showed no activity that night. Last ignition event was at 6:47 p.m. the previous evening, when Marcus drove home from work. The car had been parked and charging since then. The BMW told a different story. At 3:11:47 a.m., the engine started. The vehicle's computer logged the ignition event with millisecond precision. Engine temperature, oil pressure, fuel consumption, every parameter recorded. But here's what made it murder instead of accident. The car was started remotely. At 3:10:36 a.m., Fob 2 sent an unlock signal to the BMW from inside the house. The car's computer logged the signal strength and approximate distance. The fob was roughly 40 feet from the vehicle. Upstairs, in the master bedroom, at 3:11:47 a.m., Fob 2 sent a remote start command. The BMW's engine roared to life in the sealed garage. Carbon monoxide began filling the space immediately. At idle, the engine produced roughly 400 parts per million of CO. In an enclosed 2-car garage, lethal concentrations would build within 10 to 15 minutes. But Jennifer didn't use just the key fob. She'd also used the BMW's mobile app. The vehicle's cloud logs showed a remote start command from her iPhone at 3:11:47 a.m., the exact same timestamp as the key fob command. She'd press the button on both devices simultaneously. The app logged her phone's IP address, device identifier, and GPS coordinates. The phone was in the house, connected to their home Wi-Fi network, in the master bedroom. David Park reconstructed the sequence from the device logs. At 3:10 a.m., Jennifer unlocks the BMW using her key fob from the bedroom. At 3:11 a.m., she sends a remote start command from both her key fob and her iPhone. At 3:14:22 a.m., she opens the interior garage door remotely using the smart home app. Marcus wakes to the sound of the engine, or the smell of exhaust. His Apple Watch captures the moment his heart rate jumps from sleep to panic. He's in the garage now, trying to reach the door, or find his phone, or understand what's happening. But carbon monoxide works fast. Confusion sets in within seconds. Motor control fails. Consciousness fades. Marcus's body had been cooling for 3 hours, rigor mortis beginning to set in, making him heavier, stiffer. She grabbed his ankles, pulled. His head dragged across the concrete garage floor, then onto the hardwood. The friction left a faint stuff mark. Her heart rate climbed. 78, 82, 84 beats per minute. Elevated, but controlled. She pulled him into the home gym, positioned him on his back, adjusted his limbs to look natural, like he'd collapsed during a workout. Then she went back for the marks. A damp cloth wiped away the scuff on the hardwood. The garage floor showed nothing, too textured to leave evidence. 4 minutes. That's how long it took to stage the scene. Her heart rate returned to 72 beats per minute. At 6:47 a.m., she calls 911. Every device had recorded her actions. The key fob, the phone app, the car's computer, the door sensors, the thermostat, the Apple Watch. She'd executed a premeditated murder using technology. And that same technology had documented every step of the crime. The BMW's remote start feature was designed for convenience. On cold mornings, you could start your car from inside the house, let it warm up, defrost the windows. A luxury feature that made life easier. Jennifer had turned it into a murder weapon. The remote start command was the key. It created distance between her and the act. She pressed a button on her phone from the comfort of her bedroom. The car started 40 feet away. She never had to confront what she was doing. Never had to watch him die. David Park had reconstructed the exact sequence from the device logs. At 3:36 a.m., Jennifer picked up her key fob from the nightstand. She practiced this, reaching without lifting her arm from the mattress, keeping her wrist flat, her hand sliding across the nightstand surface, slow, controlled, minimal. The kind of movements someone might make in their sleep, adjusting position, reaching for water. The Apple Watch's accelerometer detected nothing unusual. No sudden jerks, no elevation changes, just the micro movements of a body at rest. The room was dark except for the blue glow of her iPhone screen reflecting in her eyes. $8 million. Maria Santos circled the number on her whiteboard. That was what Marcus Chen was worth dead. Detective Kovacs had the how. The digital evidence showed exactly what Jennifer had done and when she'd done it. But prosecutors needed more than method. They needed motive. They needed to show the jury why a woman would methodically plan and execute her husband's murder. The answer was in the financials. Kovacs had obtained warrants for bank records, investment accounts, insurance policies, employment contracts. She'd handed everything to the department's financial forensics unit with a simple question. What was she after? Santos had found it within 2 days. A life insurance policy. $2 million. Marcus had purchased it 18 months earlier when he'd taken the VP position at the semiconductor company. Standard executive benefit. Jennifer was the sole beneficiary. But there was a clause that changed everything. The policy doubled to $4 million in the event of accidental death. Falls, car accidents, drowning, carbon monoxide poisoning. Anything classified as accidental rather than natural causes or suicide. Jennifer needed his death to look accidental. Santos dug deeper into Marcus's employment contract. He had unvested stock options worth approximately $4 million. The stock options were on a timer. They'd become his over the next 2 years. But if he died while employed, the timer stopped. All $4 million became his immediately and passed to his estate, to Jennifer. $8 million total. The life insurance, the stock options, the house, the cars, all of it. But there was one problem with Jennifer's plan, one detail she'd overlooked that would unravel everything. A detail investigators almost missed. A piece of evidence that shouldn't have existed at all. And when they found it, it would prove she didn't act alone. Or at least, that's what it looked like at first. In a divorce, Jennifer would receive a community property split under Arizona law. Roughly half of the marital assets. But not the unvested stock options. Those were his separate property. If they divorced, she'd walk away with maybe $2 million total. If he died, she'd inherit everything. But there was something else in the records, something that explained not just the money, but the urgency. Phone records showed thousands of messages to an unknown number over 6 months. Daily contact. The frequency increased over time. By the month before Marcus's death, they were texting constantly. The contact was saved in her phone as Alex. No last name, no photo. The messages told a story of escalating intimacy. Early texts were casual, friendly. Then they shifted. Flirtation, compliments, late-night conversations. By month 3, the relationship was clearly sexual. Plans to meet at hotels. Timestamps showed they were together multiple times per week. She was living 2 lives. The executive's wife in the Paradise Valley estate, and someone else's girlfriend who was ready to start over. Text messages from the month before the murder showed her frustration building. "I can't keep doing this," she wrote. "I need this to be over." Another message 2 weeks before Marcus died. "I can't wait 2 more years for this to be over." 2 more years, the exact time frame until Marcus's remaining stock options would fully vest. If she divorced him now, she'd have to split whatever had already vested, maybe half the total value. But if she waited 2 more years for everything to vest, then divorced him, she'd split the full $4 million. If he died now, the options would vest immediately, and she'd inherit everything. The final message came 3 days before the murder. "Everything's about to change. Soon we can really start our life together." The affair wasn't just motive. It was the countdown clock. Jennifer wanted the money and a new life, and she couldn't wait 6 more months. Detective Kovacs was certain. Jennifer had help. The affair proved it. Alex Moreno had motive too. $8 million and a new life with the woman he loved. She was about to prove it. Alex Moreno had no idea he was about to be arrested for murder. He was in a Tucson hotel room, watching Netflix, thinking about the woman he loved, the woman who told him everything was about to change. What he didn't know, investigators had already found him, and in 18 hours, he'd be sitting in an interrogation room, facing murder charges. He had no idea why. Jennifer had been having an affair with him for 6 months, a commercial contractor from Tucson who'd responded to her real estate inquiry about commercial properties. 6 months of hotel meetings, separate credit card charges, and location data that placed her in Tucson when she told Marcus she was showing properties in the East Valley. Her Apple Watch had tracked every trip. The text messages showed the progression. Professional at first, then flirtation, then deeper intimacy, plans for a future together. "When this is over," she'd written in February, "we can stop hiding." Alex thought they were planning a divorce. He'd been through one himself. He knew the process. But Jennifer had done the math. Divorce meant splitting everything, maybe $2 million. Not enough to keep the Paradise Valley house, the luxury cars, the lifestyle she'd built. The messages from the final month showed her impatience growing. "I can't do this much longer," she'd written. "I need this to end." Then 3 days before the murder, "I can't wait 2 more years for this to be over. 2 more years of pretending, or 1 night of waiting while the engine ran." Detective Kovacs sat across from Alex Moreno in the interview room. He'd been in custody for 18 hours, confused, terrified, insisting he had nothing to do with Marcus Chen's death. But Kovacs had the text messages. 6 months of intimate communication between him and Jennifer. Daily contact. Plans to meet at hotels. The progression from professional to personal to something deeper. And she had the final message, 3 days before the murder. "Everything's about to change. Soon we can really start our life together." Alex was the motive. The reason Jennifer wanted Marcus dead. $8 million and a new life with the man sitting across from her right now. "I wasn't even in Phoenix that night," Alex said for the 3rd time. "I was in Tucson. I had a job site inspection." Kovacs pulled up his phone's location data on her tablet. GPS coordinates placed his device at a Marriott. She cross-referenced the address. Marriott Phoenix Airport. 3 miles from the Chen residence. Her pulse quickened. This was it. The co-conspirator. The accomplice who'd helped Jennifer plan and execute the murder. 20 hours of interrogation had led to this moment. She was about to close the case. Except she wasn't. You were at the Marriott Phoenix Airport, Kovacs said. 3 miles from Marcus Chen's house. The night he died. Alex's face went pale. No, I was in Tucson. Check the address again. Kovacs zoomed in on the map. The pin sat directly on the Marriott near Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. But Alex was shaking his head, frantic now. That's not right. I was at the Tucson Marriott, 200 miles away. Check the actual coordinates, not just the map pin. Kovacs looked at him. His panic seemed genuine. But guilty suspects panicked too. She pulled up the raw GPS data. Latitude and longitude. 32.2217 degrees N, 110.9265 degrees W. She entered the coordinates into a separate mapping tool. The pin moved. South, far south. Marriott Tucson University Park. 200 miles from Phoenix. She'd misread the location data. The map interface had auto-corrected to the nearest major city. Phoenix, instead of Tucson. The pin had been wrong. But that didn't clear him. Phones can be left behind. Alibis can be manufactured. She'd seen it before. Suspects leaving their devices in one location while they committed crimes elsewhere. You could have left your phone in Tucson and driven back, Kovacs said. Created a digital alibi while you were actually here helping Jennifer. Alex's voice cracked. I didn't leave my phone. I used it all night. Check the hotel Wi-Fi logs. Check everything. His desperation felt real. But Kovacs had been fooled by convincing performances before. She made the call. She needed every piece of data from Alex's phone for that night. Every connection, every app usage, every screen activation, every hotel security camera angle. If he'd left that phone in Tucson and driven to Phoenix, she'd find the gap in the data. The moment when the phone sat idle while he was on the road. The data came back 2 hours later. David Park walked her through it. Alex's phone connected to the Marriott Tucson's Wi-Fi at 7:34 p.m. It stayed connected all night, streaming Netflix, briefly disconnecting around 2:30 a.m. when he got up for the bathroom, then reconnecting. At 3:17 a.m., when Marcus's heart rate spiked to 160 beats per minute, Alex's phone was charging on a nightstand in Tucson, 200 miles away. By 6:24 a.m., security cameras at a construction site showed him arriving for work. He was on camera continuously until nearly noon. Dozens of witnesses placed him there. He never left. Kovacs released him after 20 hours in custody. No charges filed. His digital alibi was unbreakable. She'd been so focused on finding a co-conspirator that she'd seen guilt where there was only coincidence. The affair provided motive for Jennifer. But Alex had no idea what she was planning. He thought he was dating a woman ready to leave her marriage. He had no idea she was planning murder. No idea he was the reason Marcus died. Jennifer had acted alone. She'd pressed the button, started the car, opened the door, and waited while the man she'd married suffocated in the dark. All for $8 million and a future that would never come. Detective Kovacs walked into the interview room with a laptop and a single folder. Inside that folder, a photograph Jennifer had never seen. The last 12 minutes of her husband's life, rendered as a graph. Jennifer sat across the table, her attorney beside her. She'd maintained her composure through the arrest, the booking, the initial questioning. She'd said nothing without her lawyer present. Now Kovacs had everything. Every piece of digital evidence, every timestamp, every device log. "We've reconstructed the entire night," Kovacs said. "Every action you took, every command you sent, the devices recorded everything." She opened the laptop, turned it toward Jennifer. On the screen, a timeline, color-coded, synchronized across multiple data sources. Your key fob unlocked the BMW at 3:10 a.m. Your phone app sent the remote start command at 3:11. Both devices, simultaneously. You made absolutely sure that car started. Jennifer's expression didn't change. Her attorney made a note on his legal pad. Kovacs clicked to the next screen, the comparative data. 2 Apple Watches, 2 completely different physiological states during the same time window. Marcus's heart rate spiked at 316, maximum stress response. Your heart rate stayed at 68, calm, controlled. You were in bed while he was dying in the garage. She clicked again. The watch manipulation evidence, the biometric proof that 2 different people had worn the same device. Then you tried to cover it up. You wore his watch for 45 minutes, walked through your morning routine, but the sensors captured everything. It proved it wasn't him. Jennifer stared at the screen. Her jaw tightened, slightly, the first crack in her composure. Kovacs closed the laptop, opened the folder. Inside, a single photograph. Marcus's final heart rate graph, the line climbing to 160, then the long, terrible decline to 0. This is your husband's last 12 minutes, recorded by the watch you gave him for his birthday. Every heartbeat, every moment of panic, every second he fought to survive while you waited upstairs. Jennifer stared at the photograph. Her hands were clasped tightly on the table. Her attorney whispered something. She didn't respond. The silence stretched. 30 seconds. Then a minute. Kovacs didn't move, didn't speak. Just let the photograph sit there between them. Jennifer's breathing changed. Faster, shallower. Her attorney noticed too. He put a hand on her arm. She looked up at Kovacs. Her eyes were wet, but no tears fell. Just the hollow, empty stare of someone who'd spent 3 weeks watching her perfect plan disintegrate piece by piece. And then she did something her attorney had begged her not to do. "I want to make a statement," she said quietly. Her attorney put a hand on her arm. "Jennifer, I strongly advise." "I found him at 5 a.m., she said, "not 6:47. I found him earlier. I panicked. I didn't know what to do." Kovacs leaned forward. "Why did you wear his watch?" Jennifer's voice cracked. I thought if it looked like he'd been active that morning, they wouldn't ask questions. They'd think it was just an accident." "Why was the car running?" Silence. "Jennifer, why was your car running in a sealed garage at 3 a.m.? Her attorney stood. "This interview is over. My client won't be answering any more questions." Jennifer looked at the photograph one more time. The heart rate graph. The moment everything stopped. The moment her husband's body fought and failed while she lay in bed with a resting heart rate of 68 beats per minute. The moment she traded the man who made her coffee every morning for $8 million and a new life. She said nothing else. Kovacs watched her attorney guide her out of the room. Jennifer moved mechanically. No tears, no breakdown, just the hollow efficiency of someone who'd stopped fighting. The partial confession wouldn't hold up in court. Too ambiguous, too coached. But it didn't matter. The devices had already told the complete story. Jennifer's words only confirmed what the technology had documented from the beginning. She'd killed her husband. But there was a problem. No court in Arizona had ever admitted Apple Watch data as primary evidence in a murder trial. Defense attorneys had successfully challenged it before. Judges had thrown it out, calling it unreliable, experimental, too easy to manipulate. If the judge excluded the watch data, Jennifer would walk free. And for 3 months, it looked like that's exactly what would happen. Sarah Walsh had prosecuted 18 homicides, won 16, lost 2. The 2 she'd lost still kept her up at night. families who'd trusted her to deliver justice. Killers who'd walked free because she couldn't make a jury understand. She wasn't going to let Marcus Chen's family become number 3. The Maricopa County Prosecutor's Office had a problem. They had the most comprehensive digital evidence package in the history of Arizona homicide cases. But none of it had been tested in court at this level. Fitness tracker data had been used before. A Fitbit recorded steps during an alleged assault. A Garmin showed a runner's route contradicting an alibi. But those were supporting evidence, background details that corroborated other proof. This case was different. The Apple Watch data wasn't supporting evidence. It was the primary witness. Without it, the prosecution had a body, a cause of death, and suspicious circumstances. With it, they had a minute-by-minute reconstruction of premeditated murder. Walsh knew this case would set precedent. If she could get the Apple Watch data admitted, every murder case in the country would change. Digital devices would become unimpeachable witnesses. If she failed, Jennifer walked. Walsh had seen cases like this collapse before, not because the evidence was wrong, because the jury didn't understand it. 12 people who'd never heard of a secure enclave, who didn't know what a cryptographic hash was, who might think cloud backup meant weather data. She had one chance to make them understand. If she failed, a murderer walked free. Walsh brought in David Park, the digital forensics specialist who'd analyzed the data for investigators. She needed him to explain why this evidence was different, why it couldn't be faked or corrupted. Park walked her through Apple's security architecture. The secure enclave chip, end-to-end encryption, cryptographic signatures. Every piece of sensor data gets timestamped and encrypted the moment it's recorded, he explained. The watch creates a digital fingerprint of that data. Change even one number, and the fingerprint breaks. You can't fake it without leaving evidence. The data syncs to iCloud automatically when the watch connects to Wi-Fi or cellular. Marcus had the cellular model. The watch maintained its own LTE connection, independent of the phone. It synced at 3:47 a.m., 23 minutes after he died, and almost 2 hours before Jennifer touched it. That sync created a snapshot of everything the watch had recorded: heart rate, GPS, movement, sleep tracking. All of it encrypted and signed with a unique cryptographic key. If anyone tries to alter that data after the sync, Park said, the signature breaks. The hash doesn't match. It's immediately obvious the data has been tampered with. Walsh understood the concept. But would a jury? She needed to prove 3 things. First, that the data was authentic. Second, that it hadn't been altered. Third, that the chain of custody was intact from the moment investigators seized the watch. The authentication came from Apple's own security protocols. Park could testify that the cryptographic signatures were valid, that the data matched the secure enclave logs stored on the watch itself, that everything was consistent and unbroken. The chain of custody was straightforward. Detective Kovacs photographed the watch on Marcus's wrist at the scene. She removed it wearing gloves. She placed it in an evidence bag. She logged it into the system within 2 hours. Park extracted the data using Apple's forensic tools, the same tools law enforcement agencies worldwide use to access encrypted devices with proper warrants. The extraction created a bit-for-bit copy of everything on the watch. Walsh watched him work. Every click, every verification, looking for any gap the defense could exploit. There were none. The data was clean. But clean data meant nothing if Morrison threw it out. That copy was stored on a write-protected drive. No modifications possible. The original watch was sealed in evidence. Nobody touched it again until trial. But the defense would still challenge it. They'd bring in their own expert, someone who'd claim the data could be spoofed or corrupted. Walsh spent 2 weeks preparing Park for cross-examination. Every possible attack on the technology, every argument about reliability. The preliminary hearing would determine everything. If the judge ruled the data admissible, the case was over. Jennifer would almost certainly take a plea deal rather than face a jury with this evidence. If the judge excluded it, the prosecution would have to rely on circumstantial evidence. The car logs, the smart home sensors, the financial motive. Enough to convict? Maybe, but not certain. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks after the arrest. Both sides would present expert testimony. The judge would decide if Apple Watch data could send someone to prison for life. Walsh had 6 weeks to prepare. Brennan had 6 weeks to find a crack in the evidence. One of them would fail, and a murderer's freedom hung on which one. If Morrison ruled against them, Jennifer Chen would walk out of that courtroom a free woman, and she knew it. Jennifer's attorney, Michael Brennan, had never lost a case where he could make the evidence look uncertain. And all digital evidence, he believed, was uncertain. He built his reputation defending white-collar criminals in complex financial cases. He understood technology. He understood data. He understood how to create reasonable doubt when the evidence looked overwhelming. He brought in Dr. Richard Voss, a cybersecurity consultant who testified in dozens of cases involving digital evidence. Voss had a PhD in computer science from MIT. He'd worked for the NSA. He knew encryption, cloud security, and forensic data analysis. Brennan's strategy was straightforward. Attack the reliability of the technology itself. Make the jury question whether sensors could be trusted, whether timestamps could be accurate, whether any of this digital evidence was as certain as the prosecution claimed. The preliminary hearing began on a Tuesday morning. Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. Both sides ready to fight over whether a smartwatch could be a credible witness to murder. Sarah Walsh, the lead prosecutor, sat at the prosecution table with a knot in her stomach. She'd spent 3 months building this case around the Apple Watch data. Without it, she had circumstantial fragments. Car logs showing Jennifer's BMW started remotely. Door sensors showing someone opened the garage. Financial records showing $8 million in motive. Enough to create suspicion. Maybe enough to indict. Judge Morrison was known for being meticulous and analytical. But she was also deeply skeptical of novel evidence. 2 years earlier, she'd excluded cell tower data in a murder case. The defendant walked. 6 months ago, she'd thrown out an entire digital forensics report in a fraud case, calling the methodology experimental and unproven. Morrison didn't trust technology she couldn't personally verify. She told attorneys in previous hearings, "I'm not sending someone to prison based on a black box algorithm that nobody can explain in plain English." The Apple Watch data was exactly that. Encrypted sensor logs, proprietary algorithms, cloud-based systems that even Apple's engineers couldn't fully articulate in layman's terms. Walsh's case was about to live or die based on whether this judge believed a smartwatch could be trusted. Voss took the stand first for the defense. Brennan walked him through his credentials. The degrees, the government work, the expert testimony in 43 previous cases. Building credibility, making him unimpeachable. Then Brennan asked the critical question. Can Apple Watch sensor data be manipulated or corrupted? Voss nodded. Absolutely. Any digital system can be compromised. Sensors can malfunction. Software can have bugs. Cloud synchronization can fail or introduce errors. He explained that heart rate sensors use photoplethysmography, green LED lights that detect blood flow through the skin. The technology is generally accurate, but it can produce false readings, movement artifacts, poor skin contact, ambient light interference. A heart rate spike could be caused by the watch shifting position on the wrist, Voss said, not necessarily by actual cardiovascular stress. Walsh stood for cross-examination. She pulled up the cryptographic signatures on the courtroom monitors. Dr. Voss, are you familiar with Apple's secure enclave architecture? Generally, yes. The data from Marcus Chen's watch was encrypted and signed with a unique cryptographic key. That signature was verified against Apple's authentication servers. If the data had been altered after the cloud sync, would that signature still be valid? Voss hesitated. In theory, no. Tampering would break the signature. In theory or in practice? In practice, it would be extremely difficult to alter signed data without detection. Brennan pressed on. GPS spoofing, timestamp errors, cloud sync failures. For each attack, Voss offered the same hedge, theoretically possible. And for each one, Walsh had the same counter. Independent systems that all told the same story. The car's computer, the smart home sensors, the phone records. Same timestamps, same sequence, same conclusion. If all of these systems were malfunctioning, Walsh said, they'd show inconsistencies, random errors. They don't. They align perfectly. Voss conceded the point. The consistency across multiple sources does strengthen the reliability. Brennan had no redirect. Judge Morrison leaned back in her chair. I'll take this under advisement. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for my ruling. The courtroom emptied. Walsh walked back to her office in silence. She couldn't eat, couldn't focus. She pulled up the case files and stared at the heart rate graphs without seeing them. Everything hinged on Morrison's decision. A binary outcome, admissible or inadmissible. Case proceeds or case collapses. That night, Walsh barely slept. She kept replaying Dr. Voss's testimony. The way he'd hedged on every answer, theoretically possible, in certain circumstances, under specific conditions. He'd planted doubt, and Morrison was the kind of judge who needed absolute certainty. The next morning, Walsh arrived at the courthouse at 7:30 a.m. Morrison's clerk wouldn't make eye contact. That could mean anything or nothing. At 9 a.m., everyone reassembled. Morrison entered from chambers carrying a thick binder of technical documentation. She'd been working all night. Walsh tried to read her expression. Couldn't. In 30 seconds, she'd know if the last 3 months of work meant anything at all. She sat, adjusted her glasses, looked directly at Sarah Walsh. This is a difficult decision. The technology is sophisticated. The evidence is compelling, but it's also unprecedented in this jurisdiction. Walsh's heart sank. That phrasing, difficult decision, unprecedented, those were the words judges used before excluding evidence. Morrison continued, I've reviewed the cryptographic authentication protocols. I've examined the secure enclave architecture. I've studied case law from 17 other jurisdictions that have addressed wearable device data. She paused. The courtroom was silent. The Apple Watch data is admissible. The cryptographic authentication is sound. The chain of custody is intact. The jury will hear this evidence. Walsh exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. 3 weeks later, the trial began. 12 strangers would decide if a smartwatch could convict a murderer. Marcus Chen loved data. Lead prosecutor Sarah Walsh told the jury. He tracked everything. His workouts, his sleep, his heart rate. He wore his Apple Watch every single day. It was part of who he was. She showed photos of Marcus running, hiking, working out, always wearing the watch, always recording. That watch was with him when he died, and it recorded everything. Walsh displayed the timeline on courtroom monitors, not as raw data, as a visual story. Color-coded bars showing when devices activated, when doors opened, when the car started, when Marcus's heart stopped. She walked the jury through the key moments. The remote start command at 3:11 a.m., Marcus waking in panic. The final heartbeat at 3:24. Jennifer stayed in bed the entire time. Her own watch proves it. Heart rate steady, calm, controlled, waiting for him to die. The comparative data appeared. 2 watches, 2 completely different physiological states. Juror number 4, a nurse from Scottsdale, leaned forward. She understood heart rates. She understood what 68 beats per minute meant while someone was dying 40 feet away. She didn't look at Jennifer again for the rest of the trial. Then she tried to cover it up. She took his watch, put it on her wrist, walked through the house generating fake activity data. Walsh showed the evidence that exposed the deception, the biometric analysis, the GPS routes, the proof that it wasn't him wearing that watch. Jennifer watched the screen. Her expression didn't change, but her hands, clasped on the defense table, tightened until her knuckles went white. The technology captured every detail, every sensor reading, every timestamp. The watch became the witness that couldn't be silenced. Walsh sat down. The technology had told the story. Now the jury had to decide if they believed it. Brennan's closing was methodical. Circumstantial evidence. Alternative explanations. Reasonable doubt. He never mentioned the heart rate comparison. Never tried to explain why Jennifer's pulse stayed flat while her husband suffocated. Some evidence can't be argued away. It can only be ignored. The jury noticed what he didn't say. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. The first 3 hours, silence. Then the questions started. They requested the heart rate graph, Marcus's final 12 minutes. They studied it for 40 minutes. Then they asked for the timeline reconstruction, the synchronized data from all the devices. They wanted to see how everything aligned. They reviewed it twice. Then they asked for the biometric comparison. They wanted to be certain. Detective Kovacs sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, checking her phone every few minutes, waiting. The longer the jury deliberated, the more uncertain the outcome became. A quick verdict usually meant conviction. The evidence was overwhelming. The decision was obvious. But 9 hours. That meant doubt. That meant at least one juror wasn't convinced. 9 hours was long enough for a hung jury, long enough for a mistrial, long enough for Jennifer Chen to walk away and try again with a different judge, different jury, different odds. Kovacs checked her phone again. Nothing. At 4:17 p.m. on the 7th day of trial, the bailiff emerged from the jury room. They've reached a verdict. Kovacs felt her pulse spike. This was it. 7 days of testimony, weeks of investigation, months of digital forensics. All of it coming down to 12 strangers and a decision that would either validate everything or render it meaningless. The courtroom filled within 20 minutes. Marcus's family sat in the front row. His sister, his parents, colleagues from the semiconductor company. Jennifer's family sat on the opposite side. Her mother, her brother, faces tight with tension. Jennifer stood as the jury filed in. Her hands were clasped in front of her. Her expression was neutral, controlled, the same composure she'd maintained through the entire trial. The jury foreman was a retired systems engineer, 63 years old. He'd taken notes throughout the testimony, asked to see the technical documentation during deliberations. He understood the technology better than most. Judge Morrison asked the question, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The bailiff took the verdict form, handed it to the judge. Morrison reviewed it without expression, handed it back. "The defendant will rise." Jennifer stood. Her attorney stood beside her. "On the charge of first-degree murder, how do you find?" The foreman looked directly at Jennifer. "Guilty." Her mother gasped. Her brother put his arm around her. Jennifer's expression didn't change. She stared straight ahead. "On the charge of evidence tampering, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of insurance fraud, how do you find?" Marcus's sister started crying, quiet, restrained. His father held her hand. Judge Morrison polled the jury. Each member confirmed the verdict. 12 guilty votes on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Arizona law allowed life without parole for first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances. Premeditation, financial motive, evidence tampering. The prosecution requested the maximum sentence. Jennifer Chen would spend the rest of her life in prison. The watch she tried to manipulate had sealed her fate. The digital witness era. Marcus Chen's Apple Watch recorded his final heartbeat at 3:24 a.m. 12 minutes from engine start to cardiac arrest. His digital ghost witnessed everything. And when his killer tried to manipulate the evidence, that same ghost exposed her. Right now, your devices are recording your life, creating permanent, encrypted records of every heartbeat, every location, every moment. They're witnesses you can't silence. What is your digital ghost recording right now? And if something happened to you tonight, what story would it tell?